The chair of the National Transportation Safety Board says that deadly mid-air collision of an Army helicopter and an American Airlines plane was 100% preventable.
Those are the findings released in a final report from the NTSB.
The report shows the FAA failed to act on several of the board's previous safety recommendations.
Well, the DCA crash from a year ago, final report has just dropped 419 pages, and we have unfettered access to simulation videos from three angles, from the cockpit of the airliner, from the helicopter, and also from the control tower. I'm going to run all three for you simultaneously. We're going to stop a couple times and make comment. It's absolutely stunning, the view. I have never seen access like this to an accident investigation before. I have to say that Jennifer Hamady over there at NTSB is doing a fantastic job in pulling back the curtain on all of this. The tragedy that took 67 lives deserves a full, deep dive. She has done it over there at NTSB. We're going to analyze that deep dive today. There's a lot of things to cover. So what I want to do first is show you this video. And let's take a look at all three simulated views. Now, the NTSB came out a couple of weeks ago with these three simulator views so that we can see what was going on in the helicopter, we can see what was going on in the regional jet, and we can see what's going on from the perspective of the tower. Now, for the tower, it's not all that visual, so what we've given you is an overview of the two aircraft converging as they're coming towards each other, and they get closer and closer and closer. At the bottom of the two top screens, you're going to see a cockpit voice conversation, a transcript of what was being said between the pilots on both aircraft and what was being said from the tower to those aircraft and what each one could hear, or more importantly, couldn't hear. Because it's important for us to remember that on some of the times, some of the communications, the helicopter was on a different frequency than the airliner. So the airliner didn't hear at all about the helicopter. The helicopter got called out several times about the airliner, but the communication back and forth, the awareness was not there. The situational awareness never developed because they talk on two different frequencies. The overwhelming impact of the situation on the tower controller and what happens at the very end. So let's watch all three of these. I'm going to start rolling them now, and I'll make comment as we go.
Jet 789, 1 star, 320 to 15, gust 25, traffic 2 out, no delay, runway 1, clear takeoff.
Clear takeoff, runway 1, no delay, Jet 789.
So what you see up in your left-hand screen, upper left-hand, is the view from a Pat 25, the Black Hawk helicopter. The green circle in the middle is the vision through the night vision goggles. So this is the perspective of the right seat passenger. This would be most likely the instructor in the right seat on night vision goggles looking down the Potomac. So they're going to come over on the Lincoln Memorial on the right, and then there's going to be the Washington Monument on the left. You're going to see the entire windscreen, but remember, all the pilots could see was what's in that little green circle. So when they call and they say they've got traffic, they don't have the right traffic. They see somebody through their night vision goggles, but that's not who's being called. Eventually here, there's going to be a little red circle that comes into the screen. It gets closer and closer to that green circle. That's going to be the regional jet, American Airlines 5432. They're going to get them for a little while. They're going to go back out of the view after a while. And as you see on the right-hand screen, now that's the regional jet coming up the Potomac. They never see the helicopter, not until the very last second. And you can see them converging. So they've just cleared an aircraft for takeoff from runway 1. The first communication with the helicopter is going to take place just now.
Flight Tech 1, landing is third board 1, good night.
Flight Tech 1, Roger, for change for good night.
25 Memorial.
Pat 25, Roger.
Pat 25 just checked in and they said at Memorial. That means that they're at the probably the Lincoln Memorial. And so they're communicating with the tower controller who's watching them on the scope as they're coming up this helicopter route 4. The helicopter route 4 is the one that everybody's been talking about, because at one point with aircraft coming into runway 1 or runway 33 circle to land at DCA, there was only 75 foot of separation built into the arrival. That's not if anything goes wrong. That's just 75 feet on a normal day. That is completely inadequate. And we'll talk about all that because the report is very thorough on that. So let's keep watching. They check in. They're at the memorial.
Washington American 3130 with you, runway 1.
American 3130 Washington Tower 13114 goes to 5 from Bay 1 clear to land. Traffic department.
American's coming up the Potomac to land on runway 1.
Okay, clear to land, runway 1, American 3130.
You can see the cockpit communication back and forth. It's pretty standard. And you might want to stop the video at any point and listen or read what's being said back and forth in the cockpits, but it's completely standard.
Yeah, 789 concept on Barge. Good day.
Okay.
American 3130 full upon.
Oh, American 3130.
Head to 5. Traffic just off the Wilson Bridge is CRJ at 1,200 feet, start from runway 33.
Listen.
Roof.
Okay. Here's the first of the call-outs of traffic. He says it's up by the Wilson Bridge. Pat 25 has the traffic, he says. So this is the helicopter keying up the mic and saying, we have the traffic in sight. Request visual separation. What does that mean? He, the helicopter pilot, is requesting that they maintain their own separation. That's something that the tower can grant. They can say, yep, if you got them, which you just told us, you can maintain your own separation. So now that doesn't mean that the tower controller stops watching. It just means that the helicopter has accepted responsibility for that separation. You don't even see the American 5432 on the screen yet. They haven't even shown up yet. But he just said he sees them and he's got visual separation. That's why I contended right from the beginning they had the wrong aircraft all along. They were looking at some other little dot. There's a little dot in that green screen out there that's way off in the distance. And if they think that that's 5432, they're mistaken. And they were mistaken the entire time. But they're granted that visual separation. That's call number 1. Here we go.
American 1630 Tower, runway 1, lot boy, traffic throughout, start from runway 33, dish traffic on 6 mile funnel.
Runway 1, American 1630. 430, like that, runway 1.
All right, let me stop it right there. Upper left-hand screen. You see now it's circled in red. It says flight 5342. That's just the regional jet just now coming into their windscreen. It's still not inside that green circle. So remember, all they can see is what's inside that green circle. They've got complete tunnel vision now because they're wearing those night vision goggles. That's one of the things that's talked about in the report. Why in the world would you conduct training inside of Class B airspace where all these commercial jets are coming in and landing? It's very congested and all they can see is this much. So they're just now coming into the screen.
Mark 7, stand by.
Some joking in the helicopter.
5307. Keep rolling out to November, ground point 7. Good day.
November 305.
All right. In the cockpit, the instructor says he's got them stacked up tonight, talking about the tower controller and saying, yeah, there's a lot of aircraft coming in. Now, you'd think at this point, the other pilot, the student pilot, says, yeah, busy. So that doesn't mean she's busy. It means that they're busy. They're at tower. And so you'd think at this point, maybe the instructor would say, hey, you know what? Let's get off the night vision goggles. Let's keep our heads on a swivel. There's lots of aircraft out here. Let's suspend training until we get out of the area. That's a call that he could have made. He did not. The other little thing that Pat 25 doesn't know is that they're about 100 feet off altitude because of their erroneous altimeter setting. So they're 100 feet higher than they think they are. They think they're going to pass under all this traffic, and they're not.
Apple Tower, good evening. Here's your 1 for the single medevac.
American 1631 star 32014, gust to 5, traffic 2 mile up base from runway 33, no delay, runway 1 clear for immediate takeoff.
So you can see on the parallel screens now, some of the transmission from the tower transmits to the regional jet. Some of it transmits to the helicopter, but not all of it all the time. They get little bits here and there. Keep going.
Number 1, cleared for takeoff, American 1630.
Muscle 7, request.
Okay, Muscle 7 is a helicopter that just requested takeoff clearance. The other aircraft coming into DCA, they don't hear that transmission at all. That's a completely separate frequency. So the helicopters are talking on one frequency, the aircraft are talking on a separate frequency, and the tower sometimes talks on one or both at the same time.
Both of you say route through to zone 6. Both 7 approved.
All right. Both are getting closer to each other.
Helicopter 1,000 feet, 29901 on the altimeter. Requesting zone 6 for Fairfax.
Medevac Air Carrier 1 Washington Tower, altimeter 29900. Approved to Washington class, Robert class 4 landing straight to Fairfax.
29900 for Air Carrier 1, copy.
Okay, so at this point, the tower controller is pretty busy. They have combined two positions in the tower, the helicopter controller and the regular traffic controller, the commercial traffic into DCA. That's something that they can do. The question is, should have they done it? Well, clearly they shouldn't have that night because of what happened, but that increases dramatically the workload on the controller. So that it might be something that is legal to do, but again, is it advisable? No. So in this case, the traffic now is getting compressed. There's 2 or 3 airliners he's working with. There's now at least 2 helicopters he's working with. And Pat 25 and American 5342 are getting closer to each other all of the time. He sees that developing on his scope. He's going to say something here in a second.
Pat 25, do you have the CRJ in sight?
Pat 25, do you have the CRJ in sight? That's twice now. Now, remember the first time he called him and asked him about it? He said, yep, I got it in sight. Visual separation approved. So he gave him the visual separation, but he's not sure that he sees him. So again, at some point here, this overwhelmed controller has to take control of the situation and say to himself, he doesn't have him. He doesn't have him. And again, there are all sorts of things in this report that would have helped that controller that night, that would have helped the helicopter, that would have helped the regional jet. All those, none of those things were in place. Some of those things were, but they were ignored. And here we go. So the second call now, and here's what Pat 25 says.
Pat 25, pass on this CRJ.
Okay, so he says, pass behind him. All right. And he says one more time, Pat 25 says, requesting visual separation. He says, visual separation approved. So he gives it to him another time as he sees the two of them converging and they're virtually at the same altitude. This is the point where the controller's got to go. He doesn't see him, even if he says he's got it. Because as we're looking in that upper left-hand screen through that green circle, he doesn't have him. You don't see the other little red circle, which is the CRJ. The CRJ now has, let's say this is runway 1 at DCA. Runway 33 goes like this. So the CRJ now being cleared to circle to land on 33 has taken that normal approach straight on into 1, and he's cut out here like this to line up on 33. The view that you see from the helicopter is this way. So the regional jet now is outside that green circle view and is about to come in as this helicopter is coming this way. So this guy's circling to land. This helicopter is coming to the Potomac. He's 100 feet high, and they're gonna collide here in a minute. This is the second call. The controller should have said something, but he didn't. They're getting closer, and I'll freeze it at the moment. Look at Pat 25 in that upper right-hand screen. They don't see the regional jet at all. And right
American 472 Washington
here, right at that moment, is where Pat 25 now is crossing the final approach for runway 33, 100 feet higher than they should be. And that's the first view that the regional jet gets, that there's a helicopter in front of them or anywhere near them. And remember, they weren't told at all. They weren't called traffic, helicopter traffic, look out for helicopter traffic, keep your head on a swivel, nothing like that. They have no clue that this helicopter is coming. That's a systemic problem with how we do business around these major airports, why we aren't talking on the same frequency with helicopters and commercial jets. I have no idea, right? Why would we go down from 2 controllers, a helicopter and a commercial traffic controller, just down to 1? At night, I don't know. It's mind-boggling. But at this point, they collide. That's the last information we get from the helicopter, the last we get from the regional jet. And it's such a tragedy. Now, let's take a look at the report, because the report it's 419 pages. We're not going to take a look at the whole thing. They came out, and this is what I love about what's going on in the NTSB these days. It's complete transparency, unlike things before. And let me give you an example. Air India 171 was a crash that took place about 9-10 months ago. They came out with a preliminary report 30 days after the accident. They hit send and they published it to their website at 11:59 at night for the whole world to see and the whole world to debate and talk about. But nobody from Air India has gotten behind a microphone or in front of a camera to explain anything that's in the report. I suspect that when they come out with their final report, they'll do the same thing. They'll just publish it and nobody will answer any questions. And there's no updates in between. The NTSB routinely, after a major accident, gets in front of the cameras for the next week, maybe 2 weeks, to give you updates on how the investigation's coming. This has been really, really transparent about the DCA crash. And as you know, Jennifer Hamady has been hopping mad about the interface between NTSB and the FAA. The FAA basically is not required to institute any of the recommendations that the NTSB makes. It's shocking to me. It's just mind-numbing, and it's mind-numbing to her. And so she's got the courage to speak up, and good for her. I'm just thrilled with bureaucrats in positions that have a spine and speak up. So let's take a look at what they found, right? Here is the summation of that 419-page report. There are six things altogether, I think, that are noteworthy in the first paragraph. The NTSB determined that the probable cause of the accident was the Federal Aviation's placement, number one, of a helicopter route in close proximity to a runway approach path. Why in the world do we have helicopter routes that cross right over the end of a short final for a commercial runway? There's no reason for that at all. Here's the history behind that, right? And you've heard me talk about this in the past. Prior to 9/11, there was an 8-lane highway going into DCA. There was all sorts of arrivals from the east, the west, the north, the south, and helicopters were kind of kept out of the way, but there was the commercial jets were coming in at a much varied approach to the runway than they are today. After 9/11, Congress got so paranoid that any aircraft would come anywhere near any of their buildings that they basically took the whole east side of the Potomac and they made it a prohibited airspace. So aircraft cannot fly anywhere near any of their buildings. Now, the idea here is that they were afraid that somebody was going to hijack an airplane and fly it into one of their buildings. All right, I understand that. What they did in reaction, a knee-jerk reaction to that, was create a much worse situation on a daily basis by taking that 8-lane highway into DCA and turning it into a 2-lane country road and stacking everybody up. Because they didn't get rid of all the traffic. You still got RJs coming in there. You've got mainline aircraft. You've got helicopters. You've got medevac helicopters, you've got news helicopters, you've got everybody is all stacked up right up and down the Potomac. And if you deviate from that, you'll get violated right away. You might even get your license pulled if you don't stay on that 2-lane highway. And so they gave up one risk and created a much greater one. And it's only a matter of time until this midair was going to happen, and it happened last January. Over the years, DCA, the FAA, has been collecting data on what they call close proximity events, and they have cataloged 15,000 close proximity events over the last 10 years. That's 1,500 a year, and out of those close proximity events, there have been 85 near midairs in the last 10 years. That's 8.5 per year. That's almost verging on one midair a month for 10 years. One midair a month. And what has the FAA done with all that information? Nothing. Zip, zero, zilch. Nothing. Why in the world does a bureaucrat have a job where all they do is collect data and they don't do anything about it? All the FAA needed to do is go to the control tower at DCA and say, hey guys and gals, got any recommendations? Any ideas of how to make this thing safer? Oh my word, they would have gotten their ears talked off. How about all the close proximity events? How about all the near mid-airs? Can we get rid of those helicopter routes down the Potomac? How about widening the approaches into DCA again? You know what? It's not a danger. If somebody's going to hijack an airplane, they're not going to obey your rules anyway. So it's mind-numbing. So the first one right off the bat was the placement of these helicopter routes right up. Now they've changed that. They've rerouted them. But then again, as you heard on this channel, the National Defense Authorization Act, the Pentagon slipped in a little surprise for everybody in Section 373, basically saying that they could give themselves a waiver to these changes that have been made in the last year. And yes, they can fly Route 4 if they want to. They just have to give themselves a waiver. That's the fox guarding the henhouse. And that's got to be taken care of. Who allowed that in the Senate bill that made it to the House, that made it to the president's desk and got signed? It's because we have these 3,000-page bills that nobody can possibly read. Sorry, but it's aggravating at times, all right? That's number one. Number two is this: the failure to regularly review and evaluate helicopter routes and available data. So the FAA had a mandate in place that every year they had to reevaluate all of these helicopter routes up and down the Potomac River, just at DCA. You know how many they did over the years that they've had this? Zero, not a single one. And the NTSB found that out. Number three, failure to act on recommendations to mitigate the risk of a mid-air collision near Ronald Reagan National Airport. There's been many recommendations to do something to change these routes, and they did absolutely nothing. The FAA just sat on their hands and didn't do a thing. Number four, causal to the lack of effective pilot applied visual separation by the helicopter crew, which resulted in a mid-air collision. That is talking about the use of the night vision goggles. Why in the world is the military using night vision goggles in Class B or Class C airspace? Let me explain why, all right? They're trying to conduct training. So part of their training is from takeoff to out to your operating area. You're going to be in a combat zone and you're going to be on night vision goggles the whole time. And they're going to simulate all of that. And so this helicopter is going down the Potomac because they have to. They're required to do that. That's the route that they have to follow. But they're doing it with extreme tunnel vision as they're going down that route. The instructor could have called a timeout at any time and taken off the night vision goggles and looked around, but they didn't. The military pilots, and I was one for many years. I did 29 years in the military. The military pilots are wonderful. They're tremendously trained, but they lack experience. All right. When I was flying around VIPs and admirals and everything else, I had about 1,000 hours of total flight time. When I was a mission commander and a plane commander, at the most I had 1,500 hours. When I became an instructor and started to teach other pilots, right around 1,400, 1,500 hours of total flight time. I've now got well over 20,000 hours of total flight time. And I'm here to tell you, most military pilots, because of their lack of experience, not their lack of training, but their lack of experience, they're new, they're younger pilots. They don't know the first thing about commercial airspace. They don't know the first thing about the airlines. You don't learn about airlines in Class B and Class C until you get on with an airline, and then you start operating in that environment all the time. And so again, they just lack the experience. They're flying through these routes all the time, but they have no idea of what the volume is like or the separations or any of that stuff. They should not have been on their night vision goggles, even though they were allowed to. It wasn't prudent to do so. All right. Next is number 5. Additional causal factors were the tower team's loss of situational awareness and the degraded performance due to high workload in combined helicopter and local control positions, and the absence of a risk assessment process to identify and mitigate real-time operational risk, which resulted in misprioritization of duties and inadequate traffic advisories. What they're saying is this: there weren't enough controllers that night. And even though you can go down to just a single controller for both helicopters and commercial jets, you shouldn't. And so they want to review that and say that was one of the causing factors. And finally, the final causal factor was the Army's failure to ensure pilots were aware of the effects of error tolerance on barometric altimeters in their helicopters. In other words, the Army had a wrong altimeter setting in, or there was something wrong with the barometric system on that helicopter, and that's a big deal, especially when you're looking at potential of only 75 foot of separation on a route from a commercial jet. So all of those things are hugely important. Now, I've got a copy of the Rotor Act with me, and I've talked on this channel a lot about the Rotor Act. The Rotor Act has made it through the Senate. It's in the House. I'm going to encourage you to call your Congress representative and tell them you want to pass the Rotor Act. The Rotor Act addresses a lot of these issues that the NTSB has just now reported on. It's going to force the FAA to make changes in how aircraft communicate with each other, how training is conducted in Class B airspace. In other words, not at all. Okay, that's really important. And it's also going to tie the hands of the Pentagon so that they can't waive their own, they can't watch the guard the hen house, right? So, and there's a whole ton more in the Rotor Act. I'm a big fan of it, and I hope it gets passed and signed into law. All right, here are some of the recommendations now, things that the NTSB is recommending. And again, remember, the FAA doesn't have to follow any of these at all. Number one on their list is this: the limitations of the traffic awareness and collision alert system on both aircraft need to be updated and changed. That's the Rotor Act. The Rotor Act will do that. That's why this is such an important piece of legislation. Second is this: an unsustainable airport arrival rate, increasing traffic volume, and a changing fleet mix and airline scheduling practices at DCA. That also contributed to what happened here. So DCA has just picked up in volume over the years. It's not sustainable to get the amount of traffic in and out of there. Something's got to be done. Either more in-trail spacing or limit the amount of aircraft in and out of DCA needs to be done. The Army's lack of fully implementing safety management systems. The Army's got a whole set of issues that they've got to deal with that they were found lacking in, and they've got to get up to speed with those things if they're going to try to fly in or around commercial airspace. The FAA's failure across multiple organizations to implement previous NTSB recommendations. My friends, jump up and down. I can't tell you enough that it's just shocking to me that the FAA doesn't have to implement the NTSB recommendations, and they often do not. They often do not. That's just negligent. All right. Next is the absence of effective data sharing and analysis among the FAA, aircraft operators, and the other entities like the Army, the airlines, and all of the users that come in there. The FAA has been gathering data for all these years, and they don't share it with anybody. They don't act on it either. Those 15,000 close proximity events went into a file cabinet someplace, and nobody did anything about it. So here's where they come up with what they think ought to be done. And I have highlighted a few of them. There's like 75 of these. Some of them are more important and germane than others. Number one on my list is this: reassess the Ronald Reagan National Airport's arrival rate with special consideration to the airspace complexity, airfield limitations, mixed fleet operations, and traffic volume. Here's what I'm suggesting, folks, at the FAA. If you guys are listening over there, go back to the pre-9/11 arrivals and departures out of DCA. Start there. Start taking a look at what was going on prior to 9/11. And the reason for what we did is no longer valid, going down from an 8-lane highway to a 2-lane country road. Let's go back and start there. Second on the list is this: define objective criteria for the determination of air traffic facility levels, considering traffic and airspace volume. So what they're talking about here is, and it ends up with talking about the cost of living. It's talking about how you staff a tower. And the DCA tower has always been understaffed. Now, they have the minimum required staff, but there's a constant turnover in DCA. Why? Because of the complexity, because of the workload, because of the stress, and the cost of living, right? It's hugely expensive to live in the DCA area. So if you're a new air traffic controller, just got hired, you're at the probationary rate, and they assign you to DCA, you got to move in with somebody, live in their basement to be able to afford to live in the area. So you're going to try to get out of there as fast as you can. So again, the overall experience base in DCA is constantly turning over because the younger controllers want to get out of there. The old controllers aren't staying around because of the stress level. And so again, that's a problem. And they've got to fix that. They've got to either throw some money or a stipend or something to get people to want to stay in the DCA area. Next is this: requiring all aircraft to use the same frequency when the helicopter and local positions are combined at the Ronald Reagan International Airport and the tower. Wow. Okay. Yep. Next is this: implement anti-blocking technology that will alert controllers and/or flight crews to potentially blocked transmissions when simultaneous broadcasting occurs. It happens like this. An airliner and a helicopter key the mic at the same time. Let's say they're on the same frequency. They key the mic at the same time, and those transmissions block each other, so the tower doesn't hear either one. Two airliners, same thing. They block each other. There's technology now available to help mitigate that or to give an alert to the tower controller that their transmission was just blocked and the other aircraft didn't hear it. How is that normally handled? If the pilots hear it, if I'm flying around and I hear one person talk on top of another, it comes across my radio like this. It just goes, and I hear that buzz. And after they get done talking and the buzz goes away, I'll key the mic and I'll just say, blocked. And then usually the tower controller repeats what they said again. But that's no way to run an air traffic control system. It really isn't. How about CPDLC data link technology? It's been around for decades. When we redo the air traffic control system, we need to implement the data texting to aircraft. So, for instance, had all the instructions to PAT 2.5 been texted to them, there would have been far less talking on the radio. How about if you had just texted the regional jet that there was helicopter traffic at 3 o'clock? Take a look out your window. You can text that to them. It goes ding, and they look down and they go, helicopter traffic, okay. And then you go on and you hit the accept button. Yep, I got that. Or you hit the Roger button, or you key up your mic and go, hey, we don't have them in sight. It limits the amount of talking on the radio. I think talking on the radio should only be used in extreme situations or in emergencies. There was so much talking that night that you just heard. It's almost incomprehensible, the amount of talking on the radios and talking over top of each other. And it led to this accident. Next is this: ensure that annual reviews of helicopter route charts are being conducted throughout the airspace system by the FAA. The FAA had this mandate in place and they never once did it. Do your job. Require all aircraft operating in airspace where ADSB out is required to also be required with ADBSB in, with all cockpit displays and traffic information. That's the Rotor Act. The Rotor Act will require that by law. Everybody. And for the civilian pilots that are out there complaining about putting ADSB in your aircraft, spend $200 to put ADSB in your aircraft. It's not the end of the world. And there are more down here recommendations, but this kind of covers it at this point. This was a tragedy that could have been avoided. For many years, in fact, it was. Because of the heads-up piloting of both the helicopter and the commercial pilots coming in and out of DCA, they avoided these accidents, all those close proximity events, all those near mid-airs, because they had their head on a swivel and they were looking out the aircraft. This was every bad thing converged all at the same time. It was nighttime. It was night vision goggles. It was an overworked air traffic controller. It was a regional crew that weren't told even once that there was traffic out there. They had no idea. The only thing that they maybe possibly could have done better is just not to accept the clearance to circle to land on runway 33. But that's the least of all the things that happened here. And the FAA to do their job. Hats off to the NTSB. This is one of the most thorough reports I've ever seen. Thank you, Jennifer Hominy, and thank you over there at the NTSB for doing such a great job. I think a 419-page report and all of these highlights and recommendations is a fitting response to all those lives that were lost that day. They deserve a thorough redo so that this never happens again. And one final word on this: FAA, get your act together. get your act together. And if you need to do what you need to do, do it. But implement all of these NTSB recommendations. Let's fix DCA, and then let's do that at every other major airport around the country. The flying public deserves it. Now you know. I'm Captain Steeeve. Fly safe. Well, if you enjoyed this video, there are several other videos on the DCA incident. Check out one of these.